Madam Chair, and thank all of you for being here. This is certainly very important, industrial output and how it relates to our climate and to our environment. I wanted to ask you, Dr. Gregory, I really appreciate your perspective on the life cycle perspective and your explanation of that and how we should be looking at it throughout the whole process and the life cycle carbon output. And I appreciate that, especially looking at it from that perspective. You mentioned in your testimony that there are federal and state laws that discourage the use of many of these lower carbon alternatives. Can you describe a couple of those for me?
I don't know that they explicitly discourage it, but they don't actually really provide much incentive to use them at all.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
What about I'm very interested in biomass. I'm from Georgia, #1 forestry state in the nation, and biomass is a big part. We've got quite a few plants in our district, and I wanted to ask you about that. Would that an alternative like biomass? What about that?
That's could play a critical role in being used as a form of alternative fuel in cement plants. So instead of using the coal or natural gas to heat up that kiln to 2,700 degrees, biomass or other kinds of waste materials could be a critical way to essentially be like a zero carbon source of fuel. So that's really important.
Are there any plants that are doing that?
There are in the U.S. The current challenges is that there are often limitations on the maximum amount of alternative fuels that can be used. So for example, usually in the U.S. it's capped at about 15%, whereas in Europe and other parts of the world they're using 35% or more. And a lot of that has to do with these tensions between the use of those alternative fuels and the Clean Air Act or RCRA. And so basically those are opportunities to modify both of those in order to encourage more use of alternative fuels, because that can definitely be done in a way that preserves clean air while still lowering the carbon footprint of producing the cement through the use of alternatives.
Okay, Mr. Gordon.
Dr. Gregory, I was laughing whenever you were talking about concrete cement. My father's an engineer. My entire life, if we misused the term cement or concrete or interchanged, it was like nails on a chalkboard to him. He couldn't, he's like, no, stop.
My kids don't make that mistake either. Yeah, that's right. Anymore, right?
No, thank you for being here. You made mention earlier about access to natural gas, and I might have screwed up a little bit exactly what you said, but what role does access to natural gas for some of the concrete industry folks play in emissions strategies as we move forward, I guess now and as we move forward?
Sure. For cement plants, the temperatures they need to reach in order to make cement is 2,700 degrees Fahrenheit. And so right now they're using entirely fossil fuels. And so that's either coal or natural gas sources. Certainly natural gas is the lower CO2 option out of both of those. So having good access to natural gas is important for those plants.
Thank you. And so whenever policies are carried out that are obstructing natural gas infrastructure, preventing pipelines from being built, what happens?
I think that will play a role in the development of new plants. For existing plants, I think that the short answer is I think it loses an opportunity in order to lower CO2 emissions with cement plants.
And if we stop producing these resources domestically, what happens?
The natural gas or the cement?
Cement, I'm sorry.
Then we'd have to get it from other countries.
And going back to my question to Ms. Height, but what is your understanding of emissions profile when it's produced in other countries and sent here versus produced domestically?
There is a whole range, but if you look at China, which makes more cement than the rest of the world combined, they make over 50%, and the U.S. makes about 2% of the world's cement emissions. Generally, they have a higher carbon footprint associated with production of cement than the U.S.
So would you agree with the statement that from end to end, if we produce that cement domestically, that you are going to have a lower emissions profile than we would if we were to, again, end to end, have it manufactured in China and sent here?
That's correct.
Thank you. Madam Chair, yield back.